All right, folks, welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama. We have Greg Flamong's going to produce the show as well, and he'll pop in with some thoughts now and again into the show. Before we get going, I want to mention once again, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. Go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, and sign up. We got lots going on with spring football just around the corner. We're going to talk about spring football today, and get under the hood here and kind of start talking about all the position battles, all that type of stuff. So we're going to get to that today. Also wanted to mention our first sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade and has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. Yama's got some new looks back there. You're looking pretty styling there, Yama, with the new background.
Yeah, shout out to my wife who did this, surprised me with this. I guess she was tired of the raggedy looks of the other thing. No, she just did it. She just did it as like a nice surprise for me to kind of put it up on the wall here for all our Power Hour and Hidden Hustle and stuff. So
all right.
Yeah, it was man, shout out to my wife, man. She's the best.
There you go. So I still have the same background that I always do. So I just too.
You got all those guitars back there. I feel like,
yes.
Yeah, I feel like everyone looks at it and they're immediately jealous of you, Mike. So I think it's pretty cool.
Well, that's 35, 40 years of collecting. So it's not like I bought them all at once. That's for sure. And I'm not a really expensive guitar guy either. I don't have really expensive guitars. I have a couple really expensive guitars, but everything else is pretty, because you don't need them. You just don't need them. They're just not, it's not something that's really important. I'd say a good acoustic is important though. A good acoustic you got to spend money on, but electric guitars are, they're a dime a dozen, and it's more about finding the right one than it is, buying the most expensive one. That's for sure. All right, let's get rocking and rolling here. I was talking to Greg, and before we get into kind of this thing, I know that a lot of people are starting to get a little on edge here about recruiting. Hasn't been a commitment in a while. People are a little bit upset with, guys committing elsewhere. That's going to happen. I mean, that's just part of recruiting. That's just going to happen. But do you think it becomes a point at some point where, hey, we got to pull a trigger on getting some recruiting guys in here? And getting things going, because right now just hasn't been a lot of progress. As Greg and I discussed, I think they're in on a lot of guys right now. I'm just not sure they're leading for a lot of guys. And I know part of the thing was Notre Dame's taking a little bit slower approach, because if you look previous years, Jamie, they've landed guys and then they've backed out of their commitment later on. And that really doesn't do you a whole lot of good. And so you're going to have some defections. There's always defections in your recruiting class every single year. Last year they had probably more than they would have liked. So maybe there's a change in that regard. But when you have to kind of change everything, there is a lull where you're not out there. You're not recruiting. They were not able to get on the road because of the games that they were playing in the tournament. They couldn't get out on the road like all these other teams. They couldn't get out to see the players. They couldn't get out to kind of introduce themselves, meaning the assistant coaches and Marcus Freeman. And I think that hurts them a little bit too. A lot of these initial impressions are very important. And Notre Dame's always had kind of some roadblocks that other teams don't have, that they have to overcome. So I think Notre Dame is in a good spot in that there's a lot of kids that are offered, that seem interested and have visited. I'm just not sure there's anybody that I think is close to committing, and I'm not sure that there's anybody that we know for a fact is going to be in this class. There are some guys I think that will be, but I don't. I don't think that there's a whole lot of silent commitments or any of that type of stuff. Your thoughts here? Is this something to be concerned about at this point?
I don't know if it's time to be concerned yet. So, put it on chill. Chris Sabo, who's just like out of 14 out of 10 right now. Like, I don't think it needs to be at that point yet. But I think what you do is like you look at like everything, the recruiting calendar in like blocks, right? So it's like you look at, um, this point where it was like junior day, that kind of thing, and that kind of setup. Well, now this is the time when it's coming up where spring, and that's the next block, right? And that's going to be obviously a critical piece because you have to everything you do in the spring sets up what you have in the summer in terms of official visits and all that,
Sure,
right?
sure,
So,
sure.
I think like you have to look at like where Notre Dame is at there. Obviously, there are people who, a lot of like good targets who have scheduled official visits already. So, I mean,
Yes.
think from that perspective, I think that's great. But like you said, I don't know how many of these guys there are leading for. But at the same time, like if you just look at a perfect example of, what just happened with, USC, right? And Samote Katawanga silently committed to Notre Dame. Who cares if you get a silent commit or a guy who was like, it's looked like Notre Dame was in a great spot for him. Well, then he all of a sudden comes out and publicly commits to USC. So it doesn't matter that it's if someone is at that point. What matters is ultimately that you kind of like get them in the
In the
end,
end,
and
yes.
right. So, and we'll see. I imagine that probably is not going to be a thing that's done, and obviously with USC, they had 7 top 150 kids committed last year that decommitted, that didn't
Yeah.
end up in the class. So I don't think that and for reasons there that I don't think that like Chad Bowden is going to be the difference between those guys staying and going, maybe because they're going to recruit more California kids, maybe, but that's a whole different piece. But I think, where they're at right now, it's just like, if you look at, there's not like anyone that I would say with Notre Dame out of their like top guys that they're after that is like close to, hey, they're going to decide soon. Right. So it's not like they're in danger of like losing someone because of that. So I wouldn't say that's the thing, but yeah, I mean, specifically, I think at
Well, they just
receiver is
lost
the,
one. I mean, they did just
yeah,
lose one. Yeah.
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 But I would think specifically at receiver, I think like, because we can say, I think Chris Sable, like get off the train with the defensive line. They are in on targets. We'll see how they finish with them or whatever. They have plenty of good options there. It's going to be about like for receiver though. I just don't see the numbers there of like if they don't get like say if they don't get Finley, right? They don't get Caden Finley. Well, then who's next? Like, they don't have a lot of other guys, receivers that you're like, wow, they really have like a good shot at this guy. Right. So I think that you could maybe turn it up a little bit there to say like there's some concern there. But everything else, like obviously they got the O line, like the O line class is pretty set up pretty well. I'm positive they're going to be fine at corner. Obviously, they got Chasten Smith already in the class too. They'll be fine most of the spots on defense. I don't think, but what it's going to come down to is, receiver and how that ends up, because I just think you can't go back to back years of being like, well, it's a disappointing class at receiver again, right? You
Yeah.
just can't
No,
do
I
that.
agree. They're going to have to hit on some of these guys for sure. And, a guy like Connor Solomon, very, very important. You got to land these guys. And, Trent Mosley's another guy that they were high on, but, some people are saying that they may not be, as high on his list as a lot of people hope. But I think the problem too is coaches need time off. They've been going since
Oh yeah.
July. And can you think of the intensity it must have been for those 4 weeks that you're in the playoff? I mean, you want to talk about an intense week. It's one thing when you're in the middle of the season, but you got 4 right in a row like that. Big, huge games. I mean, the intensity of that. So you have to unplug. And I think that's what happened. And unfortunately, the coaches have to go on vacation to unplug a little bit to, rejuvenate themselves and get excited about things. But you also have a staff that's no longer there as far as, pulling the strings and everything. And so Notre Dame had to go about and figure this out. And I'm sure it's all going to work out in the end. But they have some ground to make up. There's no question about it. And I do think that the current staff, the guys that are working that, have done a really good job of getting a lot of official visits set up. And I think that's the best they can do right now. There's not, they're not considered closers or whatever. They're just guys who do kind of the background work. And so I think they've done a good job of getting all these official visits set up when really there was nobody there to do all this. So I think those guys have done a good job, and we'll just have to see how it all unfolds and go from there. All right, Jamie, let's talk a little bit about the spring practice, and let's just start at quarterback. Of course, everybody's going to want to know. I mean, I don't know how many times. I'm sure you've been asked about 1,000 too. Who's going to be the starting quarterback? And I don't know. You don't know. I don't think Notre Dame knows. I really don't. They may have an idea where they think, well, we think this guy may come out on top. But 15 practices, there's a lot for things to change. And then you talk about summer and leadership and who takes over that. And that's a big part of it as well. Getting guys out and becoming a leader. So, and then you have fall practice. And I think, I would guess probably within the first 10 days of fall practice, they'll probably start to narrow down on who it is. But there's still going to be an opportunity to impress and show what you've learned over the summer and have you improved. And I don't know about you, Yama, but I actually think this quarterback race is going to be a lot closer than people think, especially if all 3 guys stick around. You look at the situation, you say, okay, there's a lot of guys here that are in the mix. We know about Angeli, Carr, and Minchie, and then we have Abear as well. And so I don't know. I'd be surprised if this wasn't a difficult decision. I really would, because I think that they have some quality players, and we've watched them a lot in the spring. We've watched them a lot in the fall. There's really not a lot of difference between these guys. When we watch them, there really isn't. One guy may do something better than the other. But overall, when you look at them move the team, making throws, making decisions, they're very similar players. I think there's more upside with some guys than others. But then you look at a guy like Angeli, and there's something to be said for being around for 4 years and knowing the offense inside and out, and just being around people who've prepared and that type of thing. So. Let's start here with this. How do you see this unfolding?
Well, I think it's obvious that Angeli is going to be the guy who comes out with the ones at the beginning of camp. Like, he'll be the guy who comes out at the beginning. I don't imagine that
through the entire camp he is.
Through the entire camp, he's going to be working with the ones. They will work in other guys, I imagine, as well. But I think Angeli has earned that chance to do it. All he's done is whenever he's gone into the game, he has performed well, right? And I think one of the things that we've always brought up that throughout the course of the year, that him taking sacks, being able to avoid having better pocket awareness, not getting sacked when he's pressured, like avoiding pressure, doing these kind of things. Yeah, that is something that I think could be very like a red flag for him, because we know how valuable it was with Riley Leonard. But you look at like him getting put into this spot, and obviously Greg threw up the picture of him against Penn State. Like, for him to come into that situation, when you're thinking about what it is going forward, you're thinking about, well, we're going to play in Miami. That Miami crowd is going to be like
Crazy.
pretty hostile, right? He just stepped into it like as big a spot as you can get when Notre Dame was like, we're down 10, they need points. Who knows if Riley Leonard's going to be back in this game? I mean, Notre Dame is scratching and clawing just to get any kind of momentum going into halftime, and he went out and performed, right?
Yeah.
So I think that he's going to automatically go in with an edge there. So it really has to be about Minchie and Carr outperforming him. And that's what I think it's ultimately going to kind of boil down to. And we know that Minchie and Carr are better athletes than him. It's not to say Angeli is a fine athlete. He's just not the same athlete as those guys. So, and that has to be weighed into it too, because you've seen what the value of Leonard and his running ability did. And if you were to say if Minchie wins the job, would you use him like you used Leonard as a runner, right? The same thing for Carr, maybe not quite as much, but you would use those guys more than I think you would Angeli, right? So that has to kind of play into it too, right? So it's going to come down to where it's like mistakes. How many guys are like, if you're going to be throwing the ball away in spring, all this. And I know like usually like you look at practice and you're like, well, that's the time to make mistakes. You find out, you test things or whatever, but everything, like every throw is going to be graded, whether it's one-on-ones, like 11-11, all of these things. And it's just going to be so critical for all of these guys to really like perform at such a high level during the entire spring. And it does no good for Notre Dame to choose somebody after the spring. So even if somebody is leading like kind of like a cut above somebody else, it does really no good to just kind of have it that way. But I think what will probably happen is you'll kind of figure out like, here's two. These are the two. And then if the third guy decides to leave or something like that, that could happen. But ideally you go out of the spring and you say, hey, these are the two. Maybe you kind of know which guy you think is going to be the guy, but you're going to kind of focus on two after that. Because when it comes down to it, Mike, when you're getting into even the camp in the summer and all that too, guys got to get enough reps because they got to be ready for Miami, right? So all of that kind of factors into it.
I think the thing that it's crazy because I think a lot of people have discounted Steve Angeli and his ability to be a championship quarterback. And I get it, man. I understand, he doesn't have the big time arm. He doesn't have, he isn't as mobile, takes sacks that he shouldn't take. But I have a feeling if you put Carr in there and you put Minchie in there, they're going to take some sacks too. They just are. It's one of those things where you don't know until you get out there and do it. But the one thing I will say about Angeli, and I think you can say this almost universally, is every time he's been asked to go in the game, good things have happened. I mean, they just have. Good things have happened every time he's been asked to go in the game. Especially, playing an entire playoff or a bowl game and then coming into the playoffs. And then there's other times where he came in this year and had to make some plays and do some things. And if I'm Mike Denbrock and I'm Gino Guidugli and I watch that, I mean, there's nothing more pure evidence than what happens when you're thrust in a game. And that's one thing that Carr and Minchie just don't have at this point is this is what he does when he's in the game. And we know that he's accurate. I mean, he throws the ball, he anticipates throws, he does some nice things. And as you mentioned, those first few games in the beginning of the season are going to be tough. A&M and Miami, those are certainly going to be very difficult games. So if I'm Notre Dame, I'm doing everything I can to try and keep him around because I think he is a very good quarterback who can make a lot of plays. Can you teach him pocket presence? And that's something that's difficult. If there was a massive flaw of Jimmy Clausen, he had terrible pocket presence. And Um, I've mentioned this story many times. Watching his film, you'd sit there and you'd watch his film, and I kept telling people, look, this guy looks all world. He looks amazing. But if you watch his film, there's nobody within
No one was
5
sniffing him.
yards of
Yeah.
him. I mean, nobody anywhere close to him. So, yeah, he looks great, but a lot of quarterbacks will look great if you give them that much time. What happens when the pocket collapses? That's where I feel CJ Carr, because boy, we saw lots of what happens when the pocket collapses on CJ Carr, especially his last year. I mean, that was pretty much every play. And he was able to make things happen in order to do that. Now, was he able to throw the ball 40 yards downfield? No, the pressure was so much that it was a lot of dink and duck and a lot of checkdowns. So to me, with CJ Carr, it's can you expand your throwing routes to the deep ball? Can you be effective throwing the deep ball? And I think he can handle all the other stuff, but I think to be a championship quarterback, you have to be able to throw the deep ball well. I think Minchie throws the deep ball very well. We've seen it in practice. He's also very, very elusive and can make a lot of things happen like Riley Leonard, but it's just the mental mistakes. He just makes too many mental mistakes. I think if you fix the mental mistakes, my gosh, do you have a heck of a player? But we'll just have to see how it unfolds. But to me, I think it's going to be close because Angeli's going to make it very difficult for anybody to beat him out. I mean, he's already, if you look at him, he's a guy that can win you 10 games. I have no doubt that Steve Angeli can win Notre Dame 10 games. I really don't. 10 out of 12. I think he can win you 10 out of 12. I have no problem thinking he would win all those games. Can he win those other two? I don't know, and I think that's going to be the interesting thing is, can he beat Miami? Can he beat Texas A&M? When push comes to shove and USC shows up with a pulse this year, if that happens, can he beat USC and out-duel them because they're going to have some firepower and a better defense too. So overall, I really think it's going to come down to, and we've mentioned this before, Jimmy, that when you watch Notre Dame play last year, they won a lot of football games by creating turnovers and not turning the ball over. And we saw how well that formula worked for Notre Dame. And if I'm Mike Denbrock, if I'm Gino Guidugli, if I am Marcus Freeman, I'm looking for a guy that's going to protect the football and not turn it over. Because I'm not sure right now. I'm not sure right now you have a guy who is, a Deuce Knight, somebody that's got, boy, if we just let him play a little bit, he's going to be amazing, So I don't think you have that guy on the roster right now. So I think it's going to come down to the least amount of mistakes. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, it is going to be super important. And obviously you're thinking about the upside and all that, that piece of it too. But I always think of there's been a lot of guys in college football in recent years that I can think of, like a Jeff Sims, a guy who played, Notre Dame faced against Georgia Tech, and he was on Nebraska, right? And you look at him and you say, man, this guy's got a cannon for an arm. You look at how athletic, some of the runs he makes, all that kind of stuff. But the mistakes are just so massive that's why he never became a good quarterback in college football. It's because it doesn't matter that you pick out the 10 best plays and you say, this guy, is he the best quarterback in college football? You would just look at those 10 best plays, but you look at the 10 worst plays and they're so bad and they lose you games, right? So that is super, super important. I mean, ultimately it comes down to, kind of measuring whether or not you think okay, well, here's our ceiling with this, but this is our floor. And if for Minchie and Carr, it's about getting the floor up.
Yes.
Because if the floor gets there, I think ultimately the ceiling's probably higher, but it's just,
yes,
it's you have to, weigh that if, there's mistakes being made, because just all of a sudden you play two teams at the beginning of the season that are going to be, those are probably out of the Notre Dame schedule, 2 of the top 4 at the very least, I'd say, teams that Notre Dame's going to play. Well, you can't have subpar quarterback play in those games, or else you're going to lose them both, right? So, it's obviously it's a huge thing. It's I don't envy anyone making a decision about, like, a quarterback competition, because there's so much that can go wrong. But at some point you have to kind of like have conviction and just say, hey, this is our guy. This is what we're going with. This is what we prioritize. And then you just kind of go from there, because really you don't want to screw up what Notre Dame has around it, which, I mean, they got the pieces to have a great offense this year.
Yeah. I think you look at the Super Bowl, right? Doesn't matter how talented a guy like Holmes is. It doesn't matter. If you can't protect him, doesn't matter how much ability he has. It just doesn't matter. All right. If you can't protect him, and guess what? Holmes will make dumb decisions too when he's under pressure. And he made a bunch of dumb decisions in that game. And so I think that's why when you look at what Notre Dame has, you have to say, as you pointed out, they have all the other pieces to be a pretty darn good team, a good offense. Does it make more sense to go with the guy who's going to make the least amount of mistakes, because we know we're going to get turnovers. We know we're going to be in a good situation defensively. Let's just not do something offensively that's going to cause us, a chance to lose the game. And you don't want to coach that way. You don't want to play that way. But at some point, that may be the smart decision to make. And we'll see. We'll see how it all unfolds. Now, running back, I'm telling you, man, Sider's I understand why he came. There's no doubt. You look at the roster and you're like, holy crap, this is a lot of great running backs. But boy, he's going to have you're juggling chainsaws, as I like to call it, because you got to keep all these guys happy somehow. And I just don't see how you can. They legit have 5 guys who could start at a lot of places. I really think they have 5 guys on the roster right now who could start at a lot of places. And I don't think that you have any running back room in the country that has that much talent. And I do think that there's some guys that are, there's some teams that have good players. Don't get me wrong. But, when Kedron Young is your 4th best player, I mean, that's insane. That really is insane.
Yeah.
And we haven't even seen what that guy can do really yet. And it'll be interesting to see how much he plays this year, and can you keep him, and all these types of things. So I think you got to keep Price and Love happy. There's no doubt about that. But at some point, you still got to get Williams in there, and you still got to get Kedron Young in there, because those guys are really good players. So I don't know. How do you balance this, Jamie?
Well, I think it'll be easy to balance in the spring, because I just don't think they're going to give Love and Price just that much run. Like, I think they're going to protect those guys, because they're going to want to keep them completely healthy, coming out of the spring. So, I mean, those guys they'll rep some, but I think it's almost
individual work, I think, is what you'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think
trying to put his twist on them a little bit too,
Yeah. And I mean, obviously he's going to want to work with them and see them and get film of them in practice and do all those kind of things. And I think it's an opportunity though, too, for, they did a little bit of it last spring where they said, okay, well, Jeremiah Love, we're going to, work you in the slot a little bit more. We're going to do this. It's like, that's really, I think, maybe what they kind of got to do to expand some of these things, because you're probably going to have to play with 2 backs more. And just, they're not going to be like a 2-back offense, but I think you're going to see it. You're going to have to see it more, just because there are too many, mouths to feed, right? Like, you're going to have to do something and say, like, hey, we're going to have this, and you're going to have like this kind of thing to add to you. Right. So, obviously you can see Aeneas Williams can go out and line up and like beat somebody at receiver, get him on a linebacker, get him isolated more. Love, obviously, you want to see a little bit more. I mean, I'd love to see Jadarian Price worked in the passing game more too, right? And this isn't even bringing up like Jabron Payne,
Yeah.
and where he's at. But we kind of don't know yet about like how available he's going to be and what his injury situation after coming off the ACL, if he's going to be full go in the spring or not. But if he looks like the same guy that he was last spring, then he is one of those guys who's like kind of like, man, this guy's got to play some. Like he's got to play some.
Yeah, he's a guy that would start at Indiana, Purdue, all those types of places. You know what I mean? He would.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think last year Dylan McCullough did a pretty good job of like balancing the three. Like I know there's always calls like, man, Jeremiah Love should have got more of this or that, but it's like, okay, well, you're just going to give Price no carries and then he's just going to leave, and then every time anyone said like, oh, they should put them on, Love should be on third now. Then all of a sudden, Aeneas Williams makes like a great play and they're like, well, he should kind of play too. So I think ultimately it's going to be about like what you can do to get, like you said, Young involved. And I mean, he's got to go in and earn it. And that's going to be part of it. But I mean, I would compare it really to like Audric Estime in that same year where he redshirted and then he came in the next year and you're like, oh, I mean, we got to get this guy the ball, right? Yes. So I think it is going to be that kind of thing.
Gotta hope for a lot of blowouts.
Yeah, and I don't know, but I mean, obviously, it's a good problem to have, but it is going to be that is really you way rather have that than be like, well, who's Notre Dame going to start a running back or who's going to carry the load? It's like, well, they got so many guys there that it's just like the only problem is going to be like managing it and getting like, hey, can we make sure that we keep the young guys happy enough because obviously, I mean, Love's going to be a 3-and-out player. And Price, I don't imagine will be back for a 5th year. So, you want to have those guys kind of like be ready because, I mean, you don't want to have a situation where, I mean, it's Nolan James. Like, who's to say that he doesn't come in and you're like, man, this guy's pretty good. Yeah. I don't think he'll play this year because of what they have in front of him. But you just want to keep everybody happy enough
player.
that you. I mean,
I like Nolan James. I think he's going to be a really good player. I really do. I think he's a Jabron Payne type of guy. I think he's that type of guy that's probably going to get a little bit faster, but a good inside runner, has good instincts, understands what to do in between the tackles, and that's just a natural running back. So here's my thought. It's just I think we're going to see a lot of more one tight end sets. I think we're going to have to because there's just too many good players to put on the field, and we want to see Jeremiah Love catch the ball. I mean, I personally think Aeneas Williams might be the best receiver on the entire roster. I mean, that guy can catch the football. He did it all through high school, and he's every time they've thrown him the ball, he's got the ball. So I want to see. What I want to see is Mike Denbrock expand the offense to get the running backs the ball more in the passing game. One of my favorite players of all time, Theo Riddick. They can make those types of plays with Theo. And when Theo was in that role, Notre Dame's offense was extremely difficult to defend because there was just too many guys that you had to cover. And this guy, while he wasn't hitting 90-yard runs, he was getting 13, 15, 18 consistently, out of the backfield catching the ball, which puts a lot of stress on your linebackers, puts a lot of stress on your safeties, and you have to always worry about somebody like that. So I'm hoping that that's kind of an evolution we'll see, probably more one tight end sets too. I assume it's going to be Eli Raridan, and I'm good with that. If you have to get big, you bring in an extra lineman and let's run some bully ball. But I don't, as a tight ends coach, it's kind of hard for Mike Denbrock to put less guys in when you're out there trying to recruit them. But I do think that may be the best thing for the offense this year moving forward. So, all right, we got a lot of questions that we want to get to, Jamie. Get to these. We'll rifle through them. How do you feel the recruiting class is starting out? We've kind of talked about that. I like a lot of the guys in the class. Don't get me wrong. I think the guys that are already committed, I like. I don't have a problem with any of them. I think they're all good pickups and that type of thing. I would like to see more momentum, but again, I think your problem is you don't have the guys in place, and they don't have that relationship built with some of these recruits yet. That's going to happen, and then we'll see where we're at in the summer. The key is let's hope that a lot of these guys don't pull the trigger, at a junior day in March, or at some practice they go to see Clemson or something like that, and they decide, you know what, I don't need to go any further. I'm going to commit. You want to make sure you get to the official visit, and then you'll have your shot. But and then of course you want to get them on campus for you as well. You want to get them up this spring. It's going to be very, very important for Notre Dame to get a lot of these top players back on campus this spring for spring football, and so that'll be the focus, and we'll see. If you could change one thing at Notre Dame to make us more competitive, what would it be? That's a good question. Yama, any thoughts?
I mean, really, I think move it out of Indiana. No, because like just to get into a warmer climate. I think it would be and it's easy to say, because I know there was somebody who asked about, no one talks about graduation rates anymore. Notre Dame's graduation rate, they're still like doing great in the graduation rate. So anyone worried that Notre Dame has like gone away from that and it's like they don't care about that anymore, the people in charge still care about that, and they are still getting. That's why there's so many guys that get their degree in 3 years and then bounce after, because they want to make sure, hey, you got your degree, okay, now you can go, right? Like there's a lot of that. So, but I don't know, because it's easy to just say like admissions, but I think they've let more people in than they would have before, and they've worked with them better in that way. I just think some of the stuff that Matt always brings up about how like Notre Dame is always chasing. They're always chasing and reacting. They're never in front. They're never in front. And I would like to see just Notre Dame be more in front of, like, obviously it's hard to say this right now in terms of like they're building the brand new facility, but like get that done 10 years ago. Like get that done 5-10 years ago. Get this other like have all these things like what. So one way that I think that Notre Dame hires Anthony Treach from PFF to be their analytics guy. Look at like Notre Dame like dominates middle eight. They go on fourth down way more. There's things there that I'm like, they're thinking in that terms where not everyone has like an analytics guy on their staff. Like, so it's like just more of that kind of thing is what I want to see. Like find these little edges that can help you win, that don't just have to do, because it's easy to say, well, buy more 5 stars. Okay, sure. That would be great. But like do some of these other things to gain an edge.
I think it's, I hate to say it, but I think it's buy more 5 stars. I really do. and I want them to be more committed in that, right? That's where I'm at. And I just don't like, it's almost like when you talk to people around this situation, they almost feel like, well, we got a better deal. We didn't have to pay as much for this guy as these other people were going to pay. Why is that a badge of honor? That shouldn't be a badge of honor.
No.
It shouldn't. You shouldn't. Well, it's going to come down to roster management and this and that and blah blah blah. And I get that, and that's very important. And you want to make sure that you're smart about that. But I want to hear Notre Dame paid more for this wide receiver, because guess what? We need him. They need him bad. I want to hear crazy numbers being offered to a wide receiver, because look, you need him. You need him.
Yeah.
And you need it more this year than you needed it last year. Same thing with defensive linemen. Pay the guys. Just there's no moral high ground by oh, well, we didn't have to pay as much as it. That's not moral high ground. That's being cheap. If that's where we're at right now, and that is where we're at. We're paying guys. All right. There's no. It always seems like Notre Dame tries to, come through the back door and just like, well, yeah, I know everybody's going to do this, but we're going to do it our own way because we're Notre Dame and we're different. You know what I mean? It's like, why do you constantly have to make it hard? Just do what everybody else is doing. And as you mentioned, for once, why don't you do something nobody else is doing? Do something else that nobody else is doing. But when it comes to this, there's a reason all these players are going to some of these schools. It's not because they have the best co-eds and things like
when
that.
you see the pictures and you see
Yeah.
Oregon, Miami, this it's like, oh yeah, these check, like that's all they're that's what those guys care about. Yeah.
And you know, too many of those guys is a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I mean, too many of those guys is a bad thing. But there are guys that
if you want on your roster, you have conviction on somebody. And yes, and we're not talking about Derek Meadows.
Connor Solomon. You know that guy. You know you want him. Pay more than anybody. Just go out there and say, you know what? I don't care what the number is. We're going to pay you more. And then you're in the game. Then you're in the game.
Truly believe in those guys.
Yes. If those are your guys, then pay it. And so to me, that's where I'm at with it. That's where I think that they need to improve. And unfortunately, you know, I know some guys think, okay, well, this is going to be this way and this and this. I'm just not sold because I just know the reluctance just in talking to people that Notre Dame doesn't want to be known as, well, we're going to pay the most because we're a football. You are a football factory at this point. You just are. You're paying for players. Don't tell me you're not a football factory when you're paying for players.
Well, you're doing it in the transfer portal, so it's not. What's the difference, really?
You're doing it anyway. It doesn't make any sense. So, and it's all this. I want to say almost arrogance, like, well, we're just Notre Dame. We do things differently. No, what you do when you do that is you make it harder for your rock star coach to win. That's all it is. That's all it is. You're making it harder for your rock star coach to win. You finally have a guy who's a rock star, and he's built a great culture and a great system and guys who want to be here, and then you're going to sit there and nickel and dime this. Sorry, it doesn't make sense. And I know a lot of these people who run Notre Dame and make these decisions are a lot smarter than me and made a lot more money than me and blah, blah, blah. But they don't do my job. You know, they're running some company or whatever. They don't do my job, and they don't do the job that Marcus Freeman does. So listen to what Marcus Freeman tells you, because he knows more about it than I do. And if he says I need more money and we need to pay these guys, then that's what needs to be done. And all right. So I got to have one rant every year, every
show.
You know
what, Mike? It's been a while. We needed one.
I know. I haven't gone off in a while.
Yeah.
All right. Extremely excited. The Irish Open at Miami. When those two uniforms share a field, Miami will always be Jimmy Johnson in my mind, although the kids, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that just like last year, opening on the road at a top opponent will keep everybody focused? Yeah, I think so. And I mean, 88, 89 was so long ago that these kids have no recollection or anything like that. I know the fans do. But here's the thing. Miami fans, they don't show up for any game. None. I don't care if it's Florida State or Florida or the biggest ACC championship game, whatever. They don't show up. They show up for one team, and it's Notre Dame. And then it's packed to the rafters. They're hanging off, and the most obnoxious people in the world. I don't know why that is, but it's because of that. And here's the thing. Notre Dame has to go down there and match the intensity. And we knew that at A&M, and they did a great job with it. So I feel pretty confident that they're going to be fine. Do you think Indy still has a shot at Catoanga, even though he's committed to Southern Cal? Sure, they do. They're not going to give up there. What is Indy's plan for scheduling specifically? Is there optimism for USC to be extended? Is Indy trying to renew rivalries with Michigan, Michigan State, any home-and-home series? I think it's one of these things, Jamie, it's got to be kind of fluid because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think Notre Dame's been, I don't want to say slow, but reluctant to just start creating deals with a bunch of teams because, is there going to be more change to the landscape? Is there going to be more changes to conferences?
Or is it going to drop? Well, is it going to drop like the Tennessee-Nebraska game got dropped, right? So
yeah, certainly. You just never know what's going to happen. And so I think that they're being smart in that regard. I do think that they're going to continue to try and play a big team in those first 4 games, probably 2. That's what they've been doing. there's an argument to be made whether that makes sense or not, but that seems to be what they're planning to do, and we'll see how it all unfolds.
I will
Um,
say that the one thing that we do know is that they seem to have, and the ACC wants it too, is like they seem to have. There's going to be a setup where they play Miami, Florida State, or Clemson. I think that's going to be like they're going to play one of those teams each year,
yeah,
and I think that's good. Like that's a smart thing. Like I think that it should always be like that because you don't want to have a schedule, even if you look at where the schedule is this year, and we don't know how good all these teams are going to be, right? Like, obviously, some teams overachieve and whatever. Like, no one was like, well, Louisville's going to be this and Duke's going to be this. You never know. But on paper, they don't have like Miami and Texas A&M could be really good, but they also could be like
yeah,
fringe-ish top
yeah,
20 teams too.
yeah.
So
I think
it's
Miami will be in the end. That they'll be kind of fringes top 20.
yeah,
You
like
know,
I think that's
I just don't think
definitely
you
like
can
a
fix their defense in 1 year. There's just no way. Notre Dame's
yeah.
going to run
So
through them like Swiss cheese. Just watch.
yeah,
They're going to
I
run
think
through them.
I think that's a definite possibility. And if you look at it and you look at like USC, because you can't count on USC right now to be they might be a 7-win team again, right? Like we don't know, right? So
Yeah,
if you look at they don't have like that marquee game, right? And or a marquee win that you look at and it says, hey, we're gonna get this seed. We go 11-1, we're gonna get this seeding because we beat this team, right?
yeah,
And I think ultimately, like Notre Dame played so well last year, like over the course of it, like they're winning by like 30 points all again and again after the only thing that held them back from the seeding was the Northern Illinois loss. But you still want to have that on your resume to say, like, there's this, that's why we get above like Penn State here and we get
yeah.
this seeding. So
No, I agree.
yeah,
You do want to
that's
have
what I
a
think they're missing.
you want to have a win over a top 10 team if you can. You just do, and it's hard to say who that is. And if you keep scheduling a lot of guys who are around the top 10, you could end up with two, and it makes it difficult. So it's a tricky situation that they have to deal with. With a new running back coach, do you think he will rotate less and use Love more on third down? And again, I get the idea on Love on third down. I understand it. I really do. But I mean, I think I will say at the end of the year, I don't think that Aeneas did as good a job in blitz pickup, especially when it got to the playoff. I don't think he was as sharp as he was. And again, you're going against better athletes, so that certainly makes it a thing. But every time Aeneas was involved in anything, running the football, throwing or catching the ball out of the backfield, he did a marvelous job. He did a great job. And so, look, if I'm
He's gonna be a
Jeremiah
better
Love,
player
and
this year too. Yeah.
yeah, and he will be. And if I'm Jeremiah Love, right, I would look at it as almost an insult. You know what I mean? Like I should be third down back. So I would go out and try and earn that. That's what I would do. If you want to be that kind of player, look, Jahmyr Gibbs is getting paid what he's getting paid, not because he's a great interior running back. It's he can do so many things. That's what Jeremiah Love can do. And being a third down back is very important in the NFL. So if I'm Jeremiah Love, I'm trying to figure out how do I beat Aeneas Williams out. And that would be my thing that motivated me this spring and all the off season is to make sure I'm also the third down back. And maybe that happens, maybe that doesn't, but I think it's earned, and I think Aeneas earned it, and that's what we saw what happened. All right. Concerning the second team offensive line, do linemen cross train? For example, if Knapp and Walker are I assume he meant Wagner, are the starting tackles for the team, and Lambert is the third best tackle, does he cross train to play either spot in the event of an injury during a game? Go ahead, Yama.
They cross train all those guys, right? Like they do it, they work on it. Like that's something that most teams do in terms of just because, especially when it's the next guys, because you don't know if you're the next best tackle, they don't want to just put some guy in. Like they want to put that next guy. And that's why too, like you look at Charles Jugusaw, like he could go in guard one game and then play left tackle the next game, right?
Yeah.
So Obviously not everyone can do that, but there are guys who can do that and do different things. And Wagner has, Rudolph has said he's more comfortable at right tackle. So there are going to be guys that they, do that. I know Quentin Nelson was like someone who was like way more comfortable playing left guard than right. So
Right.
yeah, you're gonna have that. But I guarantee you that if there was a situation where they needed Quentin Nelson in a pinch to play right guard, he would have played it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and vice versa for almost all of these guys. So they do cross train it, they work it. You look at like Billy Shroud playing left guard, playing right guard, starting at both spots during the season. You look at Coogan, guy playing guard, played center. Like they do it all the time.
Yeah. Usually, and it's like the next man in. So if they know that say Lambert's the third tackle, well, he will be worked at right and left. Just because that you don't know whether Wagner's going down or you don't know whether Knapp is going down or whoever's playing there. So you have to kind of play both of them at both spots, or play the guy at both spots so he gets it down. All right. Do you expect to see improvement in offense in year 2 of Mike Denbrock's system? I understand they'll have better O-line, better skill players. However, this is a learning system scheme. Improvements that happen from year to year offense, similar to defensive improvements in understanding the scheme, or is it separate year for year on offense due to changes in personnel? Why do you think you're going to see a better offense? I think that literally everybody, just like we saw with Al Golden in year 2, we saw with Vandy coach Clark Lee. Once guys get a second year, they kind of know what's to expect, and then they start playing more natural, and so they don't think as much. And so I think we'll see. Like a lot of guys get a lot better. There's one right there that I think is going to get a lot better, and that's Greathouse. I think the backs will get better. I think Eli Raridan's going to get better, and I think the O-line's definitely going to get better. So we will see a better offense as far as individual players get better. But will it be a more high-scoring offense? I think that a lot of that's going to depend on the quarterback. What do you want to add, Jamie?
Well, look at Mike Denbrock at LSU and the jump they made in year 1, year 2. And obviously some of that is personnel driven, but some of it is Jaden Daniels was just like way more comfortable within that offense in his own growth. Right. So, like I think of someone specifically like a Kenny Minchie, who he came in and, 1 year and it was like, okay, well, you're learning, Jared Parker's offense. Right. And you're going in there, and then all of a sudden you switch it. It's like, okay, well, now you're going to learn Mike Denbrock's. Right.
Yeah.
So he should be someone that you would think logically will make like a pretty big jump, just based on like, well, now I'm like, more established and knowing everything that I need to know and all that. Right. And like, I think quarterback is a big one, but just overall, yeah, it definitely is a thing. Like people get more comfortable within knowing everything. It's probably for someone like Faison, who, we don't know what his availability is going to be in the spring. It's not nearly as big of a deal mentally as it was last year when it was like, okay, well, this is new. And now you're going to play field, whatever. Well, now it's, more of like, he knows what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, he knows what he needs to do. And a lot of these guys will get better in that regard. Next question, they want to know our comparison for CJ Carr. For me, I mean, he reminds me a lot of Ian Book, but probably a better version of Ian Book. He's taller. I think he can move relatively about the same. I think he can run pretty well, maybe not quite as well, but certainly pretty good. I think he's got a little bit stronger arm than Ian Book. And I think what I like about him is his ability to kind of process things. That's what set Book apart from the very beginning, was his mind could process things. And I think that's what CJ Carr can do. Now, here's the thing. Can he throw the deep ball well? Because if he can throw the deep ball well, he's going to be very difficult to get to, not start because he does everything else really well. And to me, I think that's the thing. I've not seen enough of it to say, but when you look at the spring game, threw some dimes, man, threw some really nice balls. We saw in spring a couple nice things. We saw in fall some nice things. But can you do that every day? And that's something Notre Dame has not had in a long time, Jamie. They have not had a good long ball thrower in a very, very. I can't. Who was the last? Kaiser.
Golson was
Yeah, Golson
pretty
was
good.
pretty good too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Kaiser did throw. I mean,
Yeah,
Kaiser
he
threw a
threw
great
a
deep ball
pretty
there.
deep ball. He really did. He really did. And and boy, what an arm strength that guy had. Man, he should have been amazing, but it's upstairs that
Yeah.
he struggled. But I mean, it's been that long since Notre Dame's had a good deep ball thrower. So I would say Ian Book, but I think the ceiling is higher than what Book had, in my opinion. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Book is a good like kind of Notre Dame comparison. And for ceiling, I think if I'm just thinking like college football, I'm thinking of, Bo Nix,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
Oregon.
that's a good comparison.
I
Yeah,
think he's like a very similar type
yeah,
of athlete, a guy who can create, improvise. He can move the chains with his legs, accurate, and like you said about the deep ball, that is the question because Bo Nix, that was one of the things. Like he throws a really good deep ball, and
yeah.
if that is something that you can see Carr do. I mean, I saw definitely I saw some really nice throws from him last spring, but it's going to kind of like, if he can kind of be that like kind of consistent level, then we'll see. But yeah, I think Bo Nix is a good one.
All right, Mike, what changes in recruiting do you see coming with ND and the GM and the head of recruiting being two different people? And what traits do you see, or did Denbrock see in Grubbs that made him his choice? Well, first of all, as far as what changes, I think the GM is not going to be as heavily involved in the actual recruiting part of things. I think he will play a role in that, but I don't think that that's going to be his main job or main focus. I think he's going to be more heavily involved with NIL stuff, more heavily involved with evaluation stuff. I think that you're going to see that guy take that role, and that's going to be a big focus. And then the other position will be more headed towards recruiting and being that relationship guy and making sure the relationships are what they need to be. And again, I've mentioned this on the show before. I think that the problem that they had last year and maybe even the year before that is by the time Marcus Freeman got to the close part of things, they just thought they were in a lot better position than they were. And it's impossible when you're in fourth place or third place a lot of times to overcome this. And so I think that that's going to be the focus, is to make sure that whoever's in charge of the recruiting part gives them an accurate look at where they're really at with these guys, because you don't know you need to expand the board until it's too late and the guys choose somewhere else. So you got to have a better read on the situation. I think that's it. As far as what happens with Grubbs, I think Gino certainly had a big role in that too. I think Notre Dame likes guys that play a high level of competition. He's played a very high level of competition. He's been successful. They like guys who, have leadership and can show that they can carry their team and be that. I think that has as much to do with it as anything. I'll be honest. I thought we would see more improvement from sophomore to junior year with Grubbs. I didn't see what I was hoping to see. I don't know how Notre Dame feels about it, but it's early. He's going to have a whole nother year, and then he's going to have all this time with the coaches too. So I don't think that he's elite at anything. I don't think he has an elite arm. I don't think he has, elite mobility. I don't think that he has elite accuracy. I don't think he throws an elite deep ball. But what he does do is do a lot of things well, and I think that that's the reason you take him, I guess. And to be honest, there just wasn't a lot of great quarterbacks in this class. I don't know about you, Jamie, but
no, I don't think it's a great class for quarterback.
I mean, the kid, the writer, whatever his name, I thought that kid's got a lot of potential to be a really good player. But, here's the thing. I guarantee you, if we watched a bunch of places like, South Carolina has a quarterback or somebody has a quarterback, we'd be like, oh, these guys are pretty good. they haven't come across our radar at this point. But for elite, just dominant players, I just haven't seen a lot. All right. How much does Indy factor in the playoff revenue when planning future budgets? Since it's not a sure thing, they'll get it every year. Could it be risky to budget that counts of having money, but also Indy needs to spend to remain competitive? Well, it's a good question. And, you got to hope that you're in the playoff every year, but there's also a difference between making the playoff and making the championship game. And that's a lot of money too. And so you're not going to make the championship game every year, I don't think. I think you want to budget around the 14 million and not the 32 or whatever it was in the end. You want to budget around just getting into it. And then if you have some extra, you can use it. I mean, that's the way I would look at it. I guess. How much of a loss was Pat Coogan? And from a talent aspect, was he the best option at center? I don't think so. I'll let you answer these questions, Jamie. From an experience standpoint, the fact that we're breaking in a quarterback, and from a leadership standpoint, to me, I think that's the biggest loss of Pat Coogan to me is the leadership. But your thoughts here, Jamie, on those?
Yeah, I would say the leadership standpoint is probably the biggest thing because obviously he was like the vocal leader. He was someone that they pointed out like way back last winter that he was a guy who really had stepped forward. But also remember that he wasn't that guy before last year for Notre Dame, right? Like, so there are opportunities for somebody else to do that. Obviously, I don't expect the next person to come in and they're going to have a bunch of F-bombs leading into the game. Maybe they're not going to be the exact same type of thing, but it'll be about like, someone's got to grow into that and hold people accountable. And we'll see. We'll see.
Who's that going to be? That's the interesting question.
I don't know. I don't know that.
I think Billy plays with kind of an attitude, but I don't think he's a very vocal guy,
No, I don't think so. So,
and I don't obviously, know. Wagner, I'm not sure he's a very vocal guy. Knapp, he just played a year, so how much juice does he have? I think he's going to be kind of a leader down the road. It's going to be interesting because you just don't know how the thing's going to, what if Gerby and Jugasaw start? I mean, that's a possibility. So somebody's going to have to be that guy.
Well, Coogan was that guy and he wasn't starting. Right. So it could be Craig. So exactly. Yeah. So Coogan was that guy and he wasn't the starter. Right. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But there has to be just, something there. Always think like a center is always a good candidate for it. And so like Craig would be a good candidate for it, but we'll see. He was not the best option at center. That's why he's not there because it was like, if he was the best option at center, they would have said, Pat, come back. You're going to start.
Yeah, we're giving you whatever, right?
Yeah. And exactly. So that wasn't the case. So that's why from that point, that's why no one is freaking out about the loss of him on the field. And he did a fine job.
He did.
But the other guys have a higher upside. It's just what it is.
More high, yeah. Definitely more athletic and yeah. I want to see. It's been my dream. I want to see Knapp at center because I think that will put another player in that's a very athletic player at tackle. Whether that be Gerby or who, or Charles. I don't know how that's all going to unfold, but you could also put Craig in at guard if that was a situation. You could put him there, or you could put Knapp at guard, and they would be fine. But it's finding the best guys, and I'm just telling you. Knapp starting center, Gerby Lambert, and Jugasaw, Wagner, Schrouth. Notre Dame's never had. I can't think of a time they'd have a more athletic group of players out there. I just can't. And it really would be an unprecedented, extremely agile, athletic offensive line, but also with some good size. Kirby's already, 330 pounds. Charles is too. Billy will be roughly that too. And we got to figure Knapp will be in the 300s this year. And maybe even Wagner. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Just the one thing too on the one question about the experience and like the young quarterback. You got to remember Ashton Craig was the center. He was the person he was that designated center from basically the bowl game on through like for the whole year. So it's not an inexperienced guy who would be that replacement for him if it's him. And if it's Knapp or something like that, whoever's going to play there, it's going to be an experienced guy, probably, right? Like, I mean, I guess there's a chance that it could be someone else, but I think for the most part, we feel
it's going to be Craig or Knapp for sure.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. All right. Another question here. If you were the head coach, which quarterback would you select as a starter next season? And then he kind of wants to know what goes into that. And we've already kind of talked about it, and I don't think that there's an answer at this point. I really don't.
No.
I know a lot of people have said, and a lot of people in the media have said, well, CJ Carr's the guy. We don't know that. I mean, I think he's got
it's
a lot
like saying
of
Brandon
upside.
Wimbush was the guy for the longest time, and everyone kind of anointed him. And there were so many reasons to think like, well, look at how athletic he is. He's got a big arm. He's obviously like, I mean, I think he was just featured on Forbes 30 under 30. Like, he's a smart kid who's like, whatever, everything that you think of a Notre Dame kid, that is Brandon Wimbush, right? And so you think, well, this guy, plus he's got all this physical talent that you think he's whatever. Well, he had the yips. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, there's going to be, you just don't know until it plays out. Or like everyone thought when Malik Zaire went down, well, Kaiser can't do it. It's going to be Wimbush is eventually going to take over. And then you're like, well, Kaiser's pretty good. Like, he ended up being the best guy, right? So you got to let it play out and see what happens. I know it's so easy to just say like, well, CJ Carr, he's the highest rated guy. Look at all this talent. Look at all this. He's got to go out and win it.
Yeah. Okay. How would you explain ND's recruiting strategy? I understand there may be slight changes with the new future hires, but I would love to hear how they're approaching the recruiting of top talent in the NIL area. Well, yeah. I mean, again, it just, it doesn't make sense to me that you say we're going to major in high school recruiting and minor in the portal, and yet you're not majoring in the NIL part of it, because it's a big part of it. And I think in the end, we'll probably see that. We'll see Notre Dame adjust, right? And they'll probably get more and more aggressive in acquisition of high school players. They'll probably do that because they'll figure out they're going to have to. But I'm here to tell you right now, you're going to have to. And I knew that when this first came out. So why wait? I just don't understand it. And now I do think that they've done a good job. I do think that there's like, we know for a fact that there are high school players that Notre Dame got last year that are getting paid. Most of them, actually all of them, will be a certain amount, but some of them have negotiated higher above than what they, than the standard. You're a player, you get X. So it's not that it's not happening. It definitely is happening. It's just, are you going to be a leader in that regard? Are you going to give your head coach the best opportunity and chance he can to succeed by doing this? If you're going to major in high school recruiting, then major in it. Don't, minor in that too. And so we're going to know that. We're going to know whether they're doing that or not when we start hearing stuff about, wow, they paid, as I mentioned, Connor Salmon, they paid him a crazy amount of money, right? When we hear that, then we're going to know that, hey, they're in the game. I just haven't heard that yet. Now, let's be honest. There hasn't been a lot of guys where it's been an issue at so far. Like the guys that are committed, I'm sure they've talked about NIL and this and that, and they've had discussions, and there's probably some numbers being thrown around. But when it comes to the very high profile players, it's going to be an issue, and it's going to come up. And it came up with a lot of Notre Dame's top players last year. And, Notre Dame wasn't the highest bid. They weren't even the second highest bid in a lot of these, and sometimes not even the third or the fourth highest bid. So what do you want to be? What do you want to be? And why are you making it harder? I don't understand. Go ahead.
And I just want to add this because it goes all the way back to our friend Chris Sabo. Not the actual Chris. I don't think it's the actual Chris Sabo
Yeah.
with the goggles or whatever. If it is,
Yeah.
hey, pretty cool. That's former Cincinnati Red Chris Sabo is a fan of high speed power, but he's talking about a wide receiver and defensive line. Those are the spots you have to pay like the most.
Absolutely.
Like that's what you. So when people say like Al Washington this or Mike Brown that, if you can't get in the game paying, then it's not even a thing. So even if we're talking about like, Mike, we heard about the guys that, some of the other, I think they did fine at defensive tackle in the portal, but like if they wanted to get, I didn't even think the guys that they didn't get were that good, but if they wanted to get Keyshawn Silver, who I think he ended up at Florida or whatever, right? But like if you want to get that guy, you had to pay a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
And I don't think it would have been worth it. But that's was the going rate, right? And that's kind of what it is. And that's what it is at defensive tackle and wide receiver. So when we're talking about
to get those guys, you struggle.
Yes.
You have traditionally struggled to get defensive linemen. My entire time of doing this, it's always been a problem. So if you know that, then that's where you got to spend the money.
That's where
you know the wide receiver,
because that's where everyone else is spending money too,
exactly.
Right? So that's the thing. That's the thing. People know that is because you can find edge guys that are like will grow into this and that and whatever. You can find those guys. Obviously, there's different levels of it, right? Like if you're going to get like a Colin Simmons who went to Texas or whatever, yeah, that guy's getting whatever. But like you can find others guys, but you can't find the lower guys at the same level at defensive tackle. It's just too hard to do, right? Like, I mean, you can find and develop those guys, but you're not going to get home runs there.
Yeah.
It's just too hard. The 6'7", 320-pound freaks, you're not going to get those guys.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's it for the questions. That's it for the show. I hope you enjoyed that. Wanted to mention once again, check us out on YouTube. You can find us at Irish Sports Daily. Do a search. Make sure you like the channel there and subscribe, and it greatly helps us. So also, if you like the show, share it with your friends. Share it with your Fighting Irish fans, all your friends that are big Irish fans. Send them an email. Post it on Facebook, post it on your social media. We'd greatly appreciate it. That's going to be it. Thanks for listening and watching today, folks. We will talk to you next week, and we'll get into wide receiver, tight end. We'll see if we can get to O-line. We'll see how it goes. But, spring football, not too far away, so we got to get rocking and rolling here. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.